off the air.
We're live.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. All right, intro time. 3, 2, 1. All right. Listen, you fuckers, you screwheads. Here is a man who will not take it anymore. Here is a man who stood up against the scum, the cunts, the dogs, the filth, the shit. Here is a man who stood up. Here is the host of Thursdays with Moire, or Saturdays with Moire. How's it going, guys? Welcome
You talking
to
to
our
me?
second.
You talking to me?
You talking to me?
I don't see anybody else around
out here.
Who
You're
the fuck
talking to
are
me.
You talking to?
I'm the only one here.
Yeah.
Just three kings looking at each other.
Welcome to the second edition of the Dry Fast episode, wonderfully titled, thanks to my good friend Devon, To Dry Fast to Eat Ass.
Yes,
and that
we
is
need,
twos with the number 2, just like the Too Fast to Buy Furious, because it's a very gay movie. I'm your host, Ian Taylor.
I have to give Steven credit for suggesting us calling it that. I couldn't have called it anything else.
Yeah. Hopefully we do another one, and call it Dry Fast Eat Tokyo Ass. Hopefully we'll do that at some point.
Tokyo Drift, or I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do there. By the way, I mean, if you couldn't tell, this is a not safe for work.
Yeah, we're talking about Titane. Of course, it's not safe for work.
No,
talking
I'm just
about
saying,
Titane automatically deems it as not safe for work.
No, I know. I'm just saying, you dropped a hard C-bomb there. You know, a real catch you next Tuesday.
Okay, if people don't already know that we're not suitable for work podcast, as it's labeled on Twitch and on YouTube,
I'm
sorry to disappoint you guys.
Just saying.
I'm your host, Ian Taylor.
I thought this was a good Christian podcast. Anyway.
Where we talk about girls fucking curs. I'm your host, Ian Taylor. Join me tonight as my wonderful co-host, musician, artist, and animator, Devon King, and my wonderful returning guest and indie filmmaker and fellow American, Stephen Beeson. How are you guys doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing good. It's a great day every day I'm here. Always a surprise.
Well, it's great to have you back. Just a quick note, I have the COVID, and I'm currently recovering from the COVID and a strep throat, so I apologize if I have to cough on occasion, or if my throat gets raspy, or have to take a break to get a drink every now and again. I do apologize about that. I'm feeling better, but I'm still recovering, so my mind's not going to be all that into it tonight, but I will do my best to be a wonderful host, so we will see where it goes.
Might work out in our favor because you won't be talking as much.
Hey, I mean, Stephen Beeson also has to have COVID to bounce that out.
Well,
I think we all had it at some point. I think that blood patch ritual probably wasn't doing us any favors.
Yeah, no. I mean, that threesome probably wasn't a good idea either.
Anyway, tonight we're talking about a trilogy of car-related movies.
All with sex.
Some with sex. One was
all of them. One has implied sex.
Yeah. I mean, the other one has an incel, so he's not getting laid. But which is probably a good segue to the first film of tonight, the one about the guy who doesn't get laid.
The King of the Sigmund Male grind set fucking
the literally me
what Zero Pussy does to anyway. Martin Scorsese's magnum opus, Taxi Driver, from 1976. This is
I'm about to say Magnum Dawn. Sorry.
No. Anyway, no, that would be with Willem Dafoe. Did you guys hear about that? That they didn't use his actual penis in the film Antichrist?
Yep, that is a stunt penis.
They had to use a stunt penis because Von Trier said it was confusingly large, which might be one of my favorite pieces of movie trivia.
You mean one of your favorite penises in movie trivia?
Anyway, this back to Taxi Driver. This is a 1976 American film directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Paul Schrader, It stars Robert De Niro, Jodie Foster as Sybil Shepherd, Harvey Keitel, Peter Boyle, who we have actually talked about on another Paul Schrader film. He returned for Hardcore. Um, yeah, so to kind of to kind of give a little bit of background, I mean, Taxi Driver is honestly a film that needs no introduction. But I did have some kind of fun facts here that Martin Scorsese in 1972 had completed one of his first films, which was Boxcar Bertha. And immediately after he finished it, he had gotten in touch with John Cassavetes, who is one of the most widely celebrated, if not the most celebrated, independent filmmakers of all time, certainly of the 1970s movement. He was a guy who was extremely passionate about film and at one point mortgaged his own house just because he wanted to make movies. There's stories of him, not knowing if next month they were going to have a roof over their heads, he and his wife, because this was his passion and this is what he wanted to do for a living. And Martin Scorsese screened Boxcar Bertha for John Cassavetes, and Cassavetes saw it. He walked up to Scorsese, hugged him, and said, "Marty, you've spent a whole year of your life making a piece of shit." And so they talked.
I love that story.
They had quite a bit of camaraderie and friendship, and Cassavetes, kind of admonished him to make something better. And what became the next best thing would be what is widely regarded as one of Scorsese's defining sort of earlier pictures, which was Mean Streets. After writing the success of Mean Streets, Martin Scorsese was at a party where he met another Hollywood legend in his own right, Brian De Palma, who we've also talked about on the podcast with Blowout. And De Palma placed in his hands the script of a very lonely, depressed guy who was dealing with his own trauma through this art, and that became Taxi Driver. And it was a gamble. It was a script that had floated around Hollywood. People didn't know quite what to make of it. They knew there was something there, but Scorsese took it and ran with it. And, Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver is one of the most celebrated films of all time. I don't even have time enough on this podcast to list all of the accolades that this film has received. It's been on the AFI list of greatest movies of all time. It was nominated for Academy Awards. It is just a masterpiece. And when you think about film and what film can be, Taxi Driver is probably the pinnacle of that. I would put it up there with Kubrick and just sort of the Mount Rushmore of greatest films ever made. I mean, it is certainly American films at the very least. And yeah, I mean, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. I went ahead and rewatched it in preparation for the podcast, and I was still, this many times after seeing it again, I was still absolutely captivated by this film.
I agree with it, and I think that's a great introduction, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Well done.
And it's interesting the piece you're saying about Paul Schrader. I don't know how many scripts he had written prior to this one, if this was like his breakout, or if he had was known for other things. But there's one thing you can say about Paul, at least there's a very consistent element of his writing where you're not sure what he's saying, but you know that there's something there. He's kind of our favorite resident old man yelling at clouds, although he was a young man at the time.
Who
when
lists
writing
his
this,
favorite
and
movies as his own movies.
Yeah, he did say that the Card Counter was the best movie from last year,
You
and
made that
I'm
movie,
not
man.
sure
Come
I
on.
disagree with him.
Oh, no, that's all well and good, but that's like a golden rule of a film director is that you don't list your own fucking movie as the best
Oh
movie of
yeah,
the year.
sure. It's the meme of like Obama giving the medal to Obama. Have you guys seen that?
Yep. I've
Yeah,
seen that
but like
live.
if no one else is giving you praise, you might as well, I guess. But
Yeah, sure.
you think he wouldn't need to feel like he has to prove himself after making this or after writing this? Because, damn, the writing of this is really spectacular. Oh,
Mm.
I do see that this he has one writing credit before this, and that's for a film called The Yakuza, which had been on my radar for a while, but I never actually seeked out yet. But yeah, no, the writing of this I think is what really holds together, and then also the direction. There's just some um, kind of force underlying this film, this kind of this um, directionlessness, and him trying to find purpose in life, and it getting kind of terribly misguided, but him feeling that there's like this absolution in this goal that he seeks out. Um, and him kind of acting on impulse in a way. There's something that's very lively about it and weirdly relatable. I mean, if you think about, I mean, his character in the film is 26 years old, and that's my age at the moment. So watching this again, it's been quite a few years since I had seen it last. I remember first watching as a teenager, um, thinking that there was something in the vein of what I was experiencing here, but really watching it now, I feel definitely a lot of a connection with this. And I'm curious, like, how old was Robert De Niro when he actually played this role? Was he also like that age, or was he a bit older?
Well, I
Um.
think I do know that at the time he was actually filming something in Italy and had got.
Mhm.
I don't think it was Godfather Part Two
It was
actually,
not.
but it was another film that was taking place in Italy, and so he got the phone call to do this film. And in between shooting in Italy, he would come back to New York and actually took a job as a cab driver
Mhm.
and kind of, went through these streets and really lived and breathed a lot of the experiences that Travis probably would have gone through as a
Mm.
cab driver in these situations.
Yeah, because
Um,
there definitely is like a an element of authenticity to it. Like it does feel like a lived-in lifestyle that he's gone through. Like he's gone through these emotions. He doesn't feel like he's acting really in this role,
No,
or
no.
at least like a version of himself. And I guess he was actually like 33 at the time, so he was just slightly older than his character, but not by much, which is
yeah.
yeah.
And speaking of speaking of The Godfather Part Two, in 2012, uh, Sight and Sound named this the 31st best film ever in its decennial critics poll, ranked alongside The Godfather Part Two, the fifth greatest film of all time on its directors poll. And in 1994, the film was considered culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress.
Mm.
This film is like, I mean, it's been selected for preservation by the National Film Registry. There is, there's just, I don't know. I mean, it's something that, kind of tying back to what you were saying, Devon. I saw Leonardo DiCaprio describing his first experience watching the film in an interview, and he said that he did relate to the character of Travis Bickle in the beginning, and that there was a moment that this character that you've gone on this journey with almost betrays you and becomes more obvious the kind of person that he actually is,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
and that was so almost heartbreaking in a way to see someone that you're almost rooting for become an example of what not to do.
Exactly. He's basically manipulating you throughout the entire movie. He's trying to
Oh, for
manipulate you
sure.
to his point of view, but when that moment clicks, you just realize just how depraved he is. But there are people like this out there, and I think that is the reason
Oh,
why
for sure.
Well,
an uncomfortable
he's
rise of
also a
people. Yeah,
product.
go on.
I mean, he's a product of what his occupation is, and I'm not talking about the taxi driving. I mean, he was a veteran for Vietnam, so he was, as part of that war effort,
Yeah.
they're trained to kill, um, people, and then when they come back, there isn't much, you know, direction for their life to go to afterwards or support really. And so what do they do with that kind of training? What kind of mindset does that create? And I think this film has a great argument for veterans that need support, I suppose. And I
Well,
there's so much going on here that's hard to even
oh,
break it down,
absolutely.
but
Yeah, he's
Well,
clearly
and the
going
thing,
through some kind of PTSD. Like, and I love how
definitely.
they never have like that scene, where the psychiatrist comes in and basically tells the audience, "Hey, you have PTSD." Like, no, it's just interwoven into the story in subtle ways, like the way he drops
Hmm.
his pill into his drink and makes those sizzling noises that clearly makes him uncomfortable and have to go outside. Like, little details like that are all we need to connect with a character and what they're going through. And
And
there's
I like
lots
that
of
they
things like
don't
that.
explain or give immediate meaning to those things in the moment. Like there's just the feeling to it that you're
Hmm.
kind of taking this journey alongside of him. You're experiencing what he's experiencing, and it isn't necessarily explained. You're just kind of feeling it, and you're left to interpret that as you will. And I feel like that's part of the staying power of this film is that it doesn't explain too much. It just presents the kind of immediate feeling that he
Yeah,
is experiencing, and it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. When you go back to revisit this film, you find different answers for that, and I think that's part of the staying power of this film is that it presents a lot of things without explaining them, and but in a cohesive narrative otherwise.
hmm,
And
well, and I think part of that too is like, um, it's portraying probably the like dictionary perfect example. I can't think of another film that does this to this level
hmm.
of a character study.
While also
And
being
so,
incredibly well written. It's
well,
just a
no,
perfect
I mean,
merging.
it's incredibly written and it's incredibly well directed, but it's also, I mean, we're seeing everything from Travis's point of view.
Hmm.
There are probably two or three scenes that I can think of in the entire movie that are not from his perspective, the way that he's seeing things.
Right.
And in a way, what's so incredible about this film is it's putting yourself through the eyes of this deeply disturbed and horrific person. And this was actually a controversy, that the film faced when it was first released is like,
Hmm.
is the film, racist? Well, no, it's not. It's portraying a character who is a deeply bigoted man. And
Exactly.
you're seeing things through his eyes,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean that it necessarily agrees with them.
Yeah, it's not
And one
condoning his
thing that I
actions. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and one thing that I noticed, especially on the rewatch, Devon was talking about like his occupation, not just as a as a taxi driver, but as like a veteran. One thing that I noticed is, as far as his occupation as a taxi driver, he never challenges his own views. And what I mean by that is, and this kind of ties into just how great Scorsese directs this film, but you see him at the cafe with the other guys
Abby's.
who are, yeah, cabbies, right?
Hmm.
And you see him and he looks over and it's almost shot like a horror movie, like when
It
he sees these
100%
black
is. Yeah.
people that are in like pimp attire or whatever. And what I thought was so fascinating about
And
that
not
is you
just the
can
pimps.
obviously
You're also forgetting the person who was with them is also
no,
like shot like a horror movie, like the dolly
no,
suit effect.
I'm getting to that, but what's
I'm sorry.
so insane is that later on in the film, you see the character who is the black guy. I think Charlie T is his name. He's the
Hmm.
other cabbie, and he's trying he's trying to meet Travis halfway. He's kind of joking with him about the $5 and he's calling him killer or whatever. And they're illustrating that this guy is like, look, I know this this is how you feel. I'm trying to meet you halfway. Like I can tell just by looking at you, like, you've got this look at me, but I'm trying to meet you in the middle. And Travis is still like, he's so stuck in his ways. He's never branching out, he's never challenging his own perspective, and he's constantly playing the victim. And I mean, to be able to portray that in such a nuanced way, I mean, this film is a masterpiece.
And
It's
I
those
think it's a
little things.
combination of what's said and what isn't said. Like there's a lot of lines of dialogue where he really doesn't express or articulate clearly what he's thinking, but you can see that the gears are turning. It's like when he's talking to the Wiz.
Yeah.
He's trying to express what he's thinking of doing, and he can barely even put it into words. But what he musters out is, I've got a lot of bad ideas in my head. You can tell that he's thinking about taking action and shooting some people down that he thinks are not helpful to society. But he doesn't really express that, or at least not in a way that Wiz picks up on. But you just see just how awkward or nervous his body language is, and just the kind of false starts in his dialogue that he's really having trouble kind of putting this into words and expressing this.
Yeah, and Wiz kind of encourages him too, like unintentionally, of course, but he
Oh yeah,
recommends him to an arms
yeah.
dealer. It's like, you need to pack some heat. That's the only way you can stay safe and steady like this. So it's also not just a fabric of his upbringing in the military, but a fabric of his environment and how that drives a man to act the way they do and the way that Travis does. And the city is very much its own character in that sense, where some people looked at this film. Here's something that confused me. Some people looked at this film and said, like, man, this is such a nostalgic, beautiful view of New York. But if I watched this movie the year it came out, I would never want to go to New York. Like, what are you talking about? New York is represented as like this filthy,
no, watching
dirty,
it now
nasty
is not
cesspool.
nostalgic. It's only like the music is kind of like pleasant, but
but lots of people say that. Like, there's special features where people are like,
the streets.
man, this reminds me of the best of New York. But this is like, if I saw this movie when it came out, I would be like, New York is a terrible place to live. I'm never going to America. Like, I never want to go there. But there's special features that say that, where people are like, man, this diner was really nice. You only had to pay this much money. Man, wasn't New York great? It's like, no, New York wasn't great. That's the point of the movie. Like, was it not?
Well, it also
it's an element of his of his like perspective, I guess, and then also
I guess so.
People just having rose-colored glasses, like looking at anything old school. Like they'll look at like 1940s films, and they'll say, "Hey, weren't those times great when the world was at war and
sure,
people were." Oh man.
Well, and I mean, it is worth noting that at the time they shot this film, it wound up being a happy accident of sorts, that the actual New York City government had gone on strike. There was like a trash strike.
Yeah, trash strike.
So there was
nobody
tons
would throw the
of
garbage
and just awful, smelly, shit all over the street, and that kind of, I mean, it worked perfect for this film. But yeah, I mean, and it's also worth noting, I mean, again, when you're talking about how the city is presented, it's solely through Travis' eyes. The scenes that you have that are not in the perspective of Travis is basically, the Sybil Shepherd and Albert Brooks. Those scenes, which are so lighthearted and just
very funny,
like they have so much like joy in them, and it almost feels weird, but it still kind of works in context. And then, the only other scene that I can even think of is Harvey Keitel's Sport has a scene with Jodie Foster. And that's pretty much it. This entire film is told through the eyes of Travis Bickle.
There is one scene you're missing.
Which
and
is
that? The infamous overhead shot after he deals with all of the fight. That's technically a
well,
shot not from his point of view, because it's a shot showing explicitly the consequences of his actions. But technically, that's not from his point of view, which I found interesting.
Well, you could read it from like a metaphysical sense that it's like his soul kind of ascending and looking at everything that he's done, and there's kind of a
almost
sick, twisted,
what
heroic
he's
fanfare to it.
accomplished. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, in a messed up
and
way.
it's kind of a counterpoint thing where it's, you could read it as heroic or read it as horrific, depending on your perspective.
And it's also worth noting that I think Martin Scorsese and Paul Schrader are both coming from a background of like New York Catholic sort of very religious sort of backgrounds, and so it's almost like a god's eye view in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, very influential shot. Like, so many
Oh,
movies have kind of riffed on the shot. Enter the Void had a shot that was very similar to that. Trying to think of other examples.
Has
Tarantino
done it a ton.
He did in Kill Bill, right? Or am I thinking?
I believe so.
Something else. Yeah, like tons of references to that shot in particular. And apparently that was the most annoying shot to get in the movie because the extras just would not line up where they wanted them to. But that effort really paid off because just so much imagery in this movie just burns to my retinas. And of course, we gotta talk about editing from the great film of Schoonmaker. Just fantastic editing that really further emphasizes his very twisted point of view. Great use of slow motion to highlight certain characters. I'm always amazed when certain shots in movies have so many extras, yet the clear focal point of the shot is still in perfect view despite all of the extras. Like Travis Bickle standing out from the crowd, and Sybil Shepherd standing out from the crowd, just from their costume design. But there's so many extras. Like, how is that not lost in all of that footage, especially on a low budget, especially on film?
I think you were saying it has to do with like costume design, that they made sure that they stand out of the crowd, and also the cinematographer keeping them in view and keeping them in focus. And it's funny, there's that slow motion shot of her kind of walking into the building, and she's supposed to be the focal point. But maybe it's just that I know this fact, but my eyes always go right to Martin Scorsese sitting right on the thing there. Also, because he's wearing like all black, and everyone else isn't, so he kind of steals that shot for a few seconds. But
well,
he does actual cameo. Yes,
yeah.
Best director cameo in a movie. I will accept no other substitute. He is
exactly
fantastic.
And we actually mentioned this yesterday. That was part of the reason, or sorry, last week when we were talking about the Oscars. Drive My Car. No spoilers. The main reason they picked the car to be red is so that it stands out very clearly when it's driving on the highway for those shots, because most of the other cars are silver or basically not red. So that was just so that you could very clearly kind of pick it out from those crowded shots. And yeah, the same kind of techniques are used in this film and other things.
Well, that's interesting though, because a taxi wouldn't necessarily stand out in the New York City streets, so they must have just picked their shots very carefully. I think almost a lot of the driving is real. Maybe not all of it, but a lot of it definitely is. At least all of the exterior shots had to be, because this was shot on a super low budget, and Robert De Niro. I almost said Robert Downey Jr. was an actual taxi driver, so maybe he was able to just get away with driving an actual taxi and actually trying to pick people up. So maybe they got some shots that way. I'm not too sure. But a lot of that had to be extras, so they must have just had to time their shots carefully. They must have tons of B-roll in this movie.
I know the majority of this film was shot on 35mm. Apparently, some scenes were shot on 16. That might have been the car-mounted shots, or they might have been some handheld things. But I also did notice, like at least in those car shots, you have this kind of triangular bokeh, which is that's basically like the background blur when you see the lights kind of go out of focus. That's kind of in this triangular shape, which is kind of odd. That's normally associated with I guess cheaper lenses. That's probably 16mm on the car mount. the way that they were capturing those. But it's one of those, it's not an ideal lens necessarily. Like it's not the most expensive, but it has this kind of iconic look that makes this film stand out, among other
Oh,
things.
for sure. Yeah.
Well, we
I
talked
mean,
about Travis for a while, but would you guys? I had a few questions here, except for Taxi Driver, because this is one of my favorite movies ever made, and I've watched it so
oh,
many times,
so,
talked about it so many ways. So I kind of wanted to talk about different
yeah.
things I picked up. One of the things was, uh, like even the side characters that barely get any screen time have tons of personality. Like just in the way they're written. Like even, we're talking about the cabbies in the bar. Like even Easy Andy, who shows up, he's like, "Hey Travis, got a nickel?" We call him that because he'll do anything for a buck, and that's it. But he leaves such an impact because he's such an entertaining, charming character, and there's so many characters like that to make it feel more alive. So, who was your
Well, I'm
favorite side character in Taxi Driver? Not
I
Travis,
thought
but side character.
I, I thought Easy Andy was the gun dealer, the one that
he
sells
is.
on the
No,
guns.
Yeah.
isn't Easy Andy the guy in the bar asked for a nickel?
No, that's a
I
different
don't
guy.
believe so. No, Easy Andy is the arms dealer.
Yeah, the
Um,
arms dealer.
Easy Andy.
which
Who's the guy in the? I'm so sorry. Who's the guy? Taxi driver. Okay, who's the guy that asks for? No, Easy Andy is the. Then who's the guy who asks for a nickel?
Easy Andy is the gun dealer. Are you talking about one of the other cabbies?
Yeah,
Because
he's one
there
of the
was
other cabbies. Like, who's the guy who's like, they give him a
with
nickname.
the Errol Flynn bathtub guy.
Yeah, no, the guy who's
Oh,
like,
that
hey
dude.
Travis, you got change for a quarter? Like that guy.
I don't recall.
Ah, damn it.
I will say I'm glad you brought up Easy Andy, the arms dealer, because that was going to be my answer.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah,
I
easy one.
did I did have a funny story about this. Stephen Prince, he was a friend of Martin Scorsese's. Actually, about 2 years after Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese filmed a documentary called American Boy, which was a profile of this guy that was from Scorsese's neighborhood. He had known him forever, and I don't think that he actually had a career as an actor, but he was a sort of he was a former drug addict. He was like a road manager for Neil Diamond. He had a very hard life, and the documentary was just Martin Scorsese and this very small, group of friends, interviewing this guy Stephen Prince and him sort of recounting these stories. And what I thought was so interesting was that Stephen Prince told the story where a woman had been brought to him because she had overdosed. And with the help of a medical dictionary and a magic marker, they injected a shot of adrenaline into this woman's chest to
I
bring her
can't
back to life.
possibly
And
imagine what that inspired.
yes, that was the story behind Pulp Fiction's
Mm.
infamous scene. And
Wow.
also, Stephen Prince in this same documentary told another story
No.
that was brought to life and adapted in the Richard Linklater film Walking Life, or Waking Life, excuse me. But yeah, I mean, he brings so much to this character, and he's literally just unloading this suitcase of guns. It's just a small part, but he says so much and he adds so much,
Yeah,
and it's just incredible.
and I love the irony of he's selling like the dirtiest, slimiest equipment, but the way he
Oh, of
like
course.
pitches, but notice like the way he pitches the guns is so seductive in a way where he's like, yeah, that's beauty. It's like carry 7 rounds unless you're dumb enough to put one in the chamber. And but as soon as he talks about anything else, like trying to sell a car or sell drugs, he doesn't sound as passionate. He sounds like more slimy and more dirty, like he's just trying to sell a bunch of crap. But I kind of interpreted that as Travis was interested in the guns and only the guns, and just had no patience for what the rest of the guy was selling. And stuff like that makes me think, like, okay, how much of this is really in Travis's perspective? Like, did it really happen that way? Like, why did he do such a good job pitching the
and
guns, but
that
not anything
and that
else?
all kind of ties back into the perspective and what this film is able to pull off. But I also thought it was funny that, like, there's like this, like, the way that the guns are shot. Even it's like, oh, this is a cowboy gun, and it's like it's the big long,
It's
sort of
like, this gun
Colt,
takes down elephants.
Yeah, no, definitely.
What's your answer,
I,
Devon?
I'm googling, trying to figure out what was the name of the actor that you were.
Yeah, I posted the picture in the Discord chat. He's got like
Yeah,
the
no, he was the one who wanted him to sell a piece of Errol Flynn's bathtub.
Yeah, that too. I forgot that part. I just remember he asked for a change for a nickel.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
Anyways,
Devon,
what's your answer?
Yes.
I mean, she's not really considered a minor character. Well, actually, technically, yes. Jodie Foster, I thought, was excellent in this.
Of
agreed.
course.
She's technically a minor character.
Quite literally.
That was a source of controversy.
Yep.
It was, and understandably so. Yeah.
12 years old. Yeah.
And she dressed around like that, and she talks about like so much questionable subject matter in the movie. She was so young she couldn't even go to see her own movie without her parents, who said no. Yeah. Who just put the foot down and said no.
But from what I heard, that they handled everything with her very well on set, so she wasn't traumatized by the violence that would occur later on in the film. And I was just reading a really interesting fact that apparently when she's sitting with Travis and having toast, she puts sugar on top of the toast that already has jam on it, and people would, read that as her just being kind of young and innocent. But apparently, she had spent some time with actual like prostitutes and noticed that this one girl who was a heroin addict would put extra sugar on her food to kind of cope with that, or kind of curb that addiction. I think
it's
a little
to make
bit.
up for the loss of like blood sugar or something, or loss of sugar.
Yeah, but like just the how observant she was as an actress at that age still is impressive, which is no, I think that's what contributed to her career much further down the line. And yeah, she was an excellent actress then, and it still is now.
Agreed.
Even
for
director.
sure.
Yeah, even though well, forget she was in Elysium, but other than that, she's a great actress.
Well,
and Contact.
I even Contact. I even saw a film that she directed called Money Monster from 2016.
Yeah. George Clooney,
right? Do I know?
George Clooney, right?
Yeah, George Clooney, Jodie Foster.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it wasn't bad. It seemed like it got, some bad ratings, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I mean, and I think it's all the more impressive that, she has all of these accolades behind her and is directing and acting and producing. I mean, what a talent, especially from this age onward. I mean, I wish I could say that I was nominated for an Oscar when I was 12 years old. I mean, it's only up from there,
Exactly. And she didn't get to her head either, which I think is makes her kind of like, even though she hasn't been in the best movies every time or directed the best movies, you can tell she's passionate about it either way, and that's something you can't, nobody can take away from you. And there's another way of looking at that scene when she's putting sugar on top of the jam is she's literally sugarcoating the situation. She's not taking the situation seriously, while Travis isn't eating anything. He's just a straight man. He's telling her how it is, or at least how he sees it, and trying to get her to pay more attention, but she's just sugarcoating it like she always does. It's like, you're really square, man. And I forgot, people call each other square back then.
Yeah. No, I mean, but
I can't shake that.
We also, I feel like we have to talk about the score.
Yes, Bernard Herrmann, the legend.
Bernard Herrmann, absolute mad lad legend.
That's always one part of the movie that I've been hit and miss on. I love the score now, but when I first watched it, I kind of thought it's just very repetitive and very annoying. Then I realized the point of it is to be repetitive, because he lives a very repetitive lifestyle.
for sure, and I think it works.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think it works.
But it's hard to warm
100%.
up to on a first watch, is what I'm saying. It took me a few watches
You
to get
know,
used to it.
it's also funny because when I first watched this film, I was probably, 15 or 16 years old, and
Two
I
years
didn't
old.
have a good understanding or appreciation of it. And the second time that I watched it, it all clicked, and I really understood who this character was and what this film was trying to, convey. And I think that I think it's going back to like Kubrick. It's something that you watch and you're able to pull something new out of it every time. And very few films have that, pinnacle of just timelessness, that level. This was a film that, Ingmar Bergman himself said was, I believe the word he used was like the pinnacle of uh, artistic direction. Yeah, expression. I mean, you're talking about Ingmar Bergman,
Yeah, one of the, along with Stanley Kubrick, one of the pickiest filmmakers of all time.
Oh, for sure.
Like Stanley Kubrick straight up said there's only like 3 directors worth watching, and Ingmar Bergman I think has said something similar. So when you're on his good terms, you've made it pretty far in life, my friend.
And well deserved.
Absolutely. I wanted to say my favorite side character, Sybil Shepherd. A lot of people thought she was bad in this. I thought she was great. Like, she's perfect as this kind of like weird, nervous character, and they kind of like subvert the trope of like the innocent, wholesome woman, where you can kind of tell like she's more laid back and she's kind of seen some shit. And I love their interaction at the coffee shop, despite the fact that they have cheese and apple pie, which is gross. Don't do that.
I was just reading about that. So, with the pie of melted cheese, apparently, Adine, when he was arrested, they've found him with that exact.
I
food.
think they tried to arrest him, but he said, "Can I order something first?" And they're like, "All right, fine. What do you want?" Cheese and apple pie. That's exactly what he ordered. And I just love when he says, "Do you feel the same way?" And she's like, "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." And you could tell, like, there's some, like, she's almost seen some shit. Like, she's kind of seen, like, all kinds of people and the fact, but they do share, like, a genuine connection. I think she knows that he is kind of a weirdo, but he's weirdly fascinating in a way, and their interactions are so
he is
interesting, and the porno scene is hilarious and also sad. Like, he's so disconnected from society that he thinks like going to a porno theater is just something people do. It's like, oh, couples come all the time, it's something people do on a late night after a hard day.
You have to love the part where, she's rightfully disgusted and horrified, and she's leaving, and there's
he's like, what are you doing?
No, he doesn't. It doesn't connect with him at all that it's unacceptable. But later on, he makes the statement in this monologue, like, I realize now that she's just like the others, women. Like, oh
women,
my God,
right?
Dude,
yeah,
just
no self-criticism.
That's the Sigma male incel grind set at play there.
Exactly.
No, I mean it is some real, incel behavior, but I mean there's still people like that today. It's like,
people connect with this movie. People think like Travis is the good guy. I've talked to people that think that, and it's just not. Look, I'm all for art being interpretable. That's great. That's something I encourage. There's a limit. There's a limit.
Well,
was a Family Guy who was like, yeah, but there's a limit.
For sure. I mean, but it is interesting that people do think like this, and it's it's
upsetting.
It's fascinating. It's morbid, but I think that kind of speaks to the timelessness of it. There are always going to be, unfortunately, these guys who won't ever take responsibility. They I remember hearing someone say that if you're like of a certain age and you've never been, you've never been on a date or you've never done this, or like, there's a certain point where maybe it's not all women, maybe it's you. But
Yeah,
it's
like
Exactly.
what's the common denominator here, guy? Like, just be honest with yourself.
no, for sure. And I mean, it's,
Or
I
they'll
mean,
run
it's,
into bad people and they'll think all people are like that. No, like there's just some bad people out there. There's always going to be
well,
bad
and that
people. You
that
shouldn't
also
think
ties
everybody is
into,
like that because there's one bad person you had a relationship with. It's easy for me to
well,
say, but that's the way it is.
no, and it kind of ties in too with Travis's other prejudices. And again, he's never allowing someone to come in his space. Like, on one hand, I don't think that Wiz had any idea what Travis was planning.
No, no.
And I don't think that if he did, he would have, encouraged it. It's
No,
very
no.
like inadvertent. But at the same time, it's like, the argument you could make for something like this is, you should be on the lookout for these signs, and, getting people the help they need. But at the same time, Travis is offered help. I mean,
People
in
are nice
some
to him.
ways, there
Yeah.
there are people that are nice to him that try to reach out to him, and he just flat out rejects it. He won't meet them halfway.
Because he wants to live in his own little world. He just doesn't want to admit
Exactly.
that.
No, yeah, it's incredibly narcissistic and toxic, and he's just awful, you know? And it's so bizarre to see that portrayed, and I don't think that a film today could portray this kind of character and present it in this way. I feel like if you were going to do it today, they'd try to, make it where it's more clear cut.
Yeah, they go
Like,
too far in either direction.
somebody would have to like explain to the audience that he's wrong.
Or either that, or just explain that he's a good person. Like in
Right,
I Care a Lot.
exactly. Well, I actually liked I Care a Lot. I mean,
Yeah.
it's okay for what it is, but like, this film is literally just presenting the story as it is, and make
That's
up
something
your
we don't
own
see
mind.
enough of, for sure.
And that's the beauty of it in a lot of ways.
What would you guys give an out of 10?
Oh my god. I'm going to start out. I'm going to give this a 10. I would give this an 11 if I could.
Well, why don't you?
Nice.
This is like one of my top 5 favorite films, ever made. This is a masterpiece.
Top 10 movies ever made.
Incredible.
Gets better with age. It's just a perfect combination of like artistic filmmaking and incredible dialogue, and one of the saddest, but also most accurate depictions of mental illness I've ever seen in a movie. Like, I don't know, maybe Memento is a better movie about mental illness, but I don't know. Like, this film is easily up there in that regard because it just refuses to take a side. It simply shows the perspective of the character. 9.6 out of 10. It's one of the greats. But there's only like
I'm
a few movies I give.
You're not giving it a 10.
There's only like 5 movies I'd ever give a 10 out of 10. And I've seen thousands of movies.
I was also gonna give it a 9.6. I'll give it a 9.7.
Nice.
Ooh.
And the only reason it's not a 10 is because apparently Paul Schrader had Jeff Bridges in mind originally, and I'm just curious to see what that would have been like.
Well,
is that really
Dustin
an issue,
Hoffman was considered.
Yeah.
And apparently Harvey Keitel wasn't always going to be Harvey Keitel. It's going to be played by a black man. There's some interesting behind-the-scenes drama with that, too.
I feel like that wouldn't work as well.
No.
I feel like that's...
I don't think so. Enforcing a stereotype a little bit.
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that adds like a different shade to it. Like, as if to say, like, no, like there's all kind of people like that. It's not just, this kind of
shade. Really? I mean,
yeah.
Wow.
I feel like that whole well, this is a completely different point. That whole ending like shootout scene is iconic. They had to desaturate the film in order to pass by, censors because the blood was too red. And you can tell that the whole color of the film stock was just toned down in that final sequence. But also, that whole kind of improvised look with the mohawk, I think influenced the entire punk scene. Um, music that was coming out at the time, and yeah, it's just so iconic. Like there's so many things you can talk about in this film and pull from every time you watch it.
Well, and I think
Um,
the desaturation of the blood was to keep the censors from giving it an X rating.
NC-17.
exactly.
Well, yeah, sorry, X rating. I think that's the American
Yeah,
version of
yeah,
NC-17, if I'm not mistaken. All right,
yeah.
and we go from a masterpiece to what happened with John Carpenter's career. Christine.
Oh boy, what a segue!
All right, so Christine, 1983, is based on a Stephen King novel, which is really not surprising once you realize what the film is about. Wow, a Stephen King story where a bully pulls out a switchblade. That's got to be the fifth one, the sixth one. Anyways, directed by John Carpenter, which I actually did not know before going in this movie. I saw that on the back of the rental copy. I was like, what the fuck? What? John Carpenter directed this movie? And apparently, from what I read, because The Fane was such a bomb at the box office because we can't have nice Fanes in this world, that John Carpenter essentially took this as basically a paycheck movie. Like, he wasn't too encouraged to do it, but they gave him a pretty high offer, and he needed like a success. I think this movie made a lot of money too, so he took on this movie, but he wasn't super passionate about it. It was basically just a paycheck project, from what I'm reading, which that explains a lot because it's a very bizarre and out there story. It's about this nerdish kid, pre-emo Parker. Honestly, yeah, there's so much about this movie remind me of emo Parker. Just the way he kind of his hair turns black because he takes off his glasses. His hair turns black because he's evil, and he gains more confidence throughout the story. Like, it's pretty emo Parker. I mean, come on, Sam Raimi must have watched this movie before making Spider-Man 3. This nerdish boy who's Keith Gordon, I believe, is the actor's name.
I believe so, yeah.
He buys a strange card that he was coming across one day with a guy who I almost thought was Paul Walker, but wasn't Paul Walker. I got some major Tammy and the T-Rex vibes from this movie, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So he goes by this strange car at this creepy house with a creepy old man, because we gotta stack on the cliches, just one after another, with a really nice red car called Christine. It's old, it's kind of a piece of shit, as his friend puts it, but as he does more work on it throughout the movie, it begins to transform. And as the car transforms, so does the nerdy boy. And that leads to him, running into a bunch of bullies that destroy his car, and his car kills one of them or starts running them over. I swear to God, this is the plot of the movie. I sound like I'm explaining a fever dream, but this is the plot of this fucking movie. It is wild, it is bizarre, and it feels like a shitty Stephen King story that was thankfully directed by John Carpenter. I think the filmmaking almost saves it, but not quite. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, I do want to jump in here. So you are correct that this was kind of a paycheck movie. John Carpenter did The Thing. It was a huge flop, box office bomb, which is so unfortunate that The Thing is probably another one of like my top 10 favorite movies ever. But the story was that there was a producer who had helped Tobe Hooper, who had done Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Tobe Hooper had presented a 3-hour film version, like a TV miniseries of Stephen King's Salem's Lot. And so the story was that this guy had made a lot of money on Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot was very well respected and well received at the time. And so he wanted to keep it going. He got the rights to a couple of different Stephen King novels. He actually passed on buying the rights to Cujo, which I thought was funny. But he got the rights to Christine like 7 days after the manuscript was finished. Basically, it was published, and then he bought the rights. And so he's got Christine, he gives it to John Carpenter, and he's like, make a movie out of it. Yes, and it was a paycheck, um, but I'm kind of conflicted about this because it's a little goofy.
A
I
little.
mean, it's very goofy,
Yeah.
but I still had a good time with it. It's
not
kind of
boring.
charming.
I will give you that. It's definitely not boring.
It's
Just
very
I
was
actually
fun.
charming
enjoyed it
in a
quite
way.
a bit.
I thought it was
I
fun.
I
thought
did too.
Well, it's
Yeah.
you know
also
what?
kind of bad.
It's funny because I was familiar with the plot mostly from this episode of Futurama where they kind of parody this whole thing where I think Bender turns into a werecar. So I was
Sure.
familiar with the plot from that. I actually didn't see the original film, though I was aware of it, obviously. Um, but I thought there was a lot of really interesting kind of moments in this, and there might be metaphors for other things going on where when he gets involved with Christine, um, Arnie kind of changes his personality a little bit, his character for the worse, like in Grease, which I
Yeah.
wasn't going to bring up, but there it is. But I did think that was a really interesting kind of thing, and there's a lot of interesting lines of dialogue that Arnie says in relation to that. Um, I should have written down the quotes, but I think there there was a lot more interesting stuff going on than what I was expecting from a killer car movie.
For sure.
About the tone, just real quick, about the tone you said, Steven, I don't know if it's entirely consistent because there are definitely moments where the movie feels like it's in on the joke. Like there's a scene where he's with his girlfriend. She doesn't want to hook up because she thinks the car's alive, and she starts smacking it. He's like, "Don't do that." She's like, "What? You don't like it when I slap your girl?" Like, obviously that was meant to be a joke. Okay, like this was
Sure.
meant to be funny. But then later
Sure.
on, like the car is trashed, and he's like grieving with his family. Like, and the whole family's grieving. Like, his girlfriend committed suicide or something. I'm like, is this a joke? Is this supposed to be serious? This is stupid. Why would they care about his fucking car?
Suicide.
I cannot believe you committed suicide. Why? I can't get you out of this one. Yeah, but it was. I'm like, was this meant to be a joke? And there's this. You know what this reminds me of, Devon? This kind of reminds me of Fat Man, where I was constantly like, is this a joke? Is this just stupid? Is this trying to be scary? I don't know. And I felt like that throughout the entire movie.
Okay, it wasn't that bad. This movie actually, I think, at least knows what it is. I don't think
it's not terrible, but it is just frustrating.
Fat Man was.
It's not as bad as Fat Man. Yeah, it's not as bad as Fat Man for sure. The filmmaking, like I said, saves this movie. It's got a banger of a score, by the way. Holy crap!
Oh yeah, I mean the cinematography and the direction and everything, putting this together is
super
leads above a lot of stuff. Like it's a lot better than it needed to be, I think.
For sure. And I mean, you're talking about the score. This also has an incredible soundtrack.
Yeah.
Some of the like pretty much every song in this is an absolute banger.
Also, ironic use of music too, which I found.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I loved that the Rolling Stones are a part of the soundtrack. Like, holy shit, this is all right.
Yeah,
and they're not cheap either. Man,
no, they're not.
You get royalties for a Rolling Stones song. That's like half your budget.
They blew half the budget on royalties for sure. They blew half the budget, but there's a lot.
But it was so ingrained into the plot, it kind of had to be.
Yeah, you couldn't do it any other way, and it's engraved into the car as well. Like the car lives on through the music, so to speak. But there's a lot about like the pacing of the movie that was weird. Like you mentioned the 3 hour. When you said 3 hours at first, Stephen, I thought you meant Christine was 3 hours, because there's no way this movie was not 3 hours. It feels like there was so much missing in this movie, and let me explain why, just real quick. So, the first time, we see the main character, I'm terrible with names, I'm sorry, we see Arnie kind of go off and build his car, it cuts away from him for a while and kind of focuses on Dennis. And by the time we go back to Arnie, not only has Arnie completely changed, but he's also with, the girl that Donnie was after. Surprise, surprise. This is very predictable. But I feel like there was something missing there. It's like, wait, hold up. Where was the build-up to that? Like, the whole appeal of the movie is that this nerdish kid is gaining confidence in evil for this car. But there isn't really enough of an arc to establish that. It feels like parts of that are missing. Like, he kind of already is this little bastard. Like, at the start of the movie, he's immediately calling out his bully, and immediately telling as soon as he buys the car, he straight up tells his parents to fuck off, and he goes to a car shop
Well,
to build his car.
no,
But it's
I
like
will.
I feel
I
like
will
we
No,
should have
say.
built
I
to
think the
that.
car starts to change him. Like there's
But
some
right away.
influence there.
But I would have preferred it, I think, if there was more of an arc to that. Like at first, like maybe it's showing positive change. Like he has the confidence to ask out this girl. He has the confidence to tell his bullies, tell on his bullies and stuff like that. But he kind of already is at that state. I feel like that sucks out the fun of his character arc a lot. It's like I don't buy that this character is going for a change because he kind of already is this way. I feel like that was a missed opportunity for me. And there's also like the girl, like so there's this blonde girl,
Yeah.
who keeps like hitting on Discount Paul Walker, and I kind of saw that as like how all these movies have like the real girl, like the girl they should have been after the whole time, and stuff like that. But she's never addressed. She never shows up in the second half of the movie. I was like, wait a second. Like I thought you were doing a thing there. I thought you were being like, okay, well this girl is like the true honest girl that the character. Why would you set her up like that if you're not gonna do anything with her? And I feel like in the director's cut of this movie that I believe exists somewhere, she was part of that, but she just kind of isn't in the second act of the movie. That was so weird.
Well, okay, so I noticed that, and I'm glad you brought that up. That kind of bothered me too.
Yeah.
I will say, in the defense of this movie, just purely playing devil's advocate, the book is over 700 pages. So, adapting something into at least this level of a cohesive narrative, I think is at least commendable on some level. There are moments of it that are pretty goofy. There's some, just silliness to it. I don't think that it's a bad movie. I don't think that
I wouldn't say it's bad. It's just it feels like a bad Stephen King story that was thankfully directed by John Carpenter.
Well, I put this in my review. It's like, this is a perfect film if you're a fan of John Carpenter or if you're a fan of Stephen King, but this is not either of their best works.
No, like it doesn't even feel like a good merging of their style, because again, like parts of it feel very goofy, very tongue-in-cheek, kind of like Stephen King's weirder works, like Maximum Overdrive or something along those lines. Sleepwalkers. Man. It honestly reminds me of that at points, but there's also parts where it feels like it's genuinely trying to be scary. Like John Carpenter wants this film to be more scary than it is, but I'm sorry.
John Carpenter
a car
is not
killing people is never going to be scary. Like, I'm sorry. I just don't find that to be a very scary concept.
Not, he's no stranger to camp. I mean, you look at something like Big Trouble in Little China.
Absolutely
he's
not.
having fun.
Yeah, but it also feels like he's kind of like genuinely trying to make a creepy movie at times. It's like it doesn't work. I'm sorry. When the rest of the film is so goofy, I can't take this seriously.
I will say this. This came out the same year as David Cronenberg's The Dead Zone.
That had a much better balancing of tone.
I feel like that's a way better Stephen King adaptation. Mm-hmm. And the fact that exists and is as good as it is did kind of take away from my score on this one. Now, I will say, I don't want to shit on this movie because you're talking about half the budget. Half the budget didn't go to royalties. Half the budget
went to the Carfax, baby.
To the cars.
Oh, okay? Yeah.
These cars were incredibly hard to come by even back then. They had the warehouse that the Arnie character is working on his car and he works at. Okay, they had like half of that used for the set. And then there was a divider. The other half was where they would repair these cars after they had been burnt up and broken and set on fire and everything else.
Yeah.
The sequence where the car comes alive and is on fire and runs down one of the school bullies, that was a practical effect.
Yeah, completely. And just completely a stuntman going over the car. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a stuntman in there in full, like, fireproof armor.
Yeah, it was so dangerous.
behind the wheel of this flaming car, and the windows are blacked out. It was incredibly difficult to see, not only because of the smoke, but the windows are tinted because Carpenter wanted to direct it in such a way that it was ambiguous if it was Arnie behind the wheel or if the car had come to life. And so the guy is literally like, he can't see out, and he's driving a flaming car. Like, that's so. I mean, I'm sorry.
The amount of trust you'd have to have. Yeah, the amount of trust you'd have to have in your department for that would be
for sure.
catastrophic.
You couldn't do that today.
No.
You couldn't do it.
Well, I mean, you could, but there would be so many regulations you'd have to take and so many forms you'd have to sign.
We talked about
or
this.
Or these guys probably just like, you want to be in a burning car? Yeah, all right, get in there.
No, and we talked about this too with like Candyman. It's
That's
like the
different.
original Candyman.
That's a little different, I think.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is, like the original Candyman, they raised these bees and they paid him per sting, and it's like in the remake, it's like, we have digital bees, it's like, But yeah, I mean, there's something that you can't achieve the way that these older films did with the practical effects, and this film looks awesome.
Yeah,
as far as practical effects, they had some of the team come back from The Thing. Some people that had worked on Jaws were a part of this.
Yeah, I think the people worked on Jaws did the effect of the car like reforming itself. Like, that was a really impressive effect. It's a little goofy and silly, but it works. And it's
here's the thing is that they didn't have any good transition shots of the car transforming. Like, they didn't have any footage of anything, so they were trying to figure out after the fact, like, we need to see this car transforming, how to do that. So they created a system of using like hydraulic clamps that would pull the car inward, and then they would reverse the footage. And I thought that was really, innovative for its time, clever, especially when it's technically an afterthought. Like, they were looking at the edit and they didn't have any footage of the car transforming, and I think that was the most probably iconic factor element to this whole film, is seeing the car kind of uncrinkle itself.
Yeah, it's a beautifully directed, beautifully shot movie that unfortunately had to be based around a stupid story.
Well, leave it to Stephen King to write 700 pages about a monster car, first of all.
I mean, he wrote thousands of pages about a child incest and a killer clown, so...
Well, it's these like epic kind of executions of otherwise B movie type of stories. So,
I love that kind of stuff.
Who's really at fault here?
But
I think that's exactly it. I think this is right up your alley, Steven. And I thought that this was a really well done one. Like, I quite enjoyed it for what it is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not without its faults. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that, this film it's a little silly.
It's hard to dislike it, though.
Very silly.
It is hard to dislike it.
I don't dislike it. I did enjoy it. It's just, I'm wondering how much of that enjoyment was ironic, and how much of that enjoyment was intended.
I think that's fair too. I mean, but again, it's like you kind of have this goofy, silly idea. And you've got all of these people who, are so passionate. I mean, even John Carpenter, when he's kind of half-assing this thing for a paycheck, like, he's still putting 110%.
Oh, yeah. It's like Steven Spielberg with The Lost World. Apparently, that was a half-assed project, but if you watch the movie, it's like, this is an incredibly well-directed and well-shot movie for a project that was supposedly half-assed, and it feels the same way here. But both stories just didn't have much material to work with.
Well, he's not putting out mediocre work, which I think is commendable, because, this is the kind of film that I think a lot of people would look at and kind of look down on, like, it's a, silly car movie,
true.
Whatever.
This film is actually pretty well rated. Like, it has more than 3.5 on Letterboxd and a decent.
No, it does. Score. I mean, but what I'm saying is, I think a lot of that has to do with you have someone who is just so passionate about film, who's making this the
even
best
at the
that
worst,
they possibly can.
They still try. Like, there's still an effort put into it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and maybe it's more effort than this deserves, but it's commendable as hell. I
I'd
mean,
agree with that.
uh it's also funny. I was reading that the actress who plays the girlfriend, the love interest of Arnie, she was actually a vegetarian. So that scene where she bites into the hamburger, she just cheated that by eating the bread off
Yeah,
the burger.
that was kind of funny.
But
I noticed that too.
I thought that was kind of a fun fact.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
also,
yeah, go on.
also loved seeing Harry Dean Stanton. My God,
Yeah, I was
what?
so happy when he showed up. I was like, everything stands in this fucking movie, and his character is hilarious. Like
Of
again,
course, it's
that's where the
hysterical.
tone is so all over the place. Because at first it's like I thought this was like a serious interrogation. Then he's casually mentioned it's like, this kid took a shit on your front window there. And I'm like, wait, did the kid take a shit on front window? Was that in the scene? I don't remember. And it gets
No,
so
he
goofy.
didn't.
I'm like, what is the tone of this fucking movie?
No. What I mean, Devon, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, Devon, do you have anything to add? Did you have any issues with it, Devon? I love the pause. Are you there? Did you die?
He should be. He died. He's rest in peace. While we're waiting to hear back from him, I would just say that I have to commend this film, if nothing else, because it tries to make the insult shitter a real thing. Nobody says that.
Yeah, there's so many parts of this movie where I was like, nobody fucking says that. Nobody acts that way. The parents are so horribly written. Holy crap! They're the perfect textbook. This is how parents talk to their kids, right? Clearly written by people who didn't talk to their parents very often. They're so bad. Every time they'd said a line, I was just. There's a scene where the mother is like, there's a scene where the mother like is mad at like the friend for not being a good enough friend. Not even in the sense that he's being a dick or anything, but he's like, why can't you be a better friend so my son isn't around all the time? It's like, what the fuck? Like, why is it that is like it's his job? Like it's your job to be like the perfect friend. It's like, what? Parents don't talk like this.
Sure.
Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, well, and there's like, and no, seriously, there is like 3 different examples of someone insulting another person by calling them a shitter. And I didn't know this was like a real insult.
It's not. I talked to my mom and I was like, is that a real insult? And she's like, no.
No, nobody says that. No.
And that's the end of the conversation. Also, I mentioned there were some Tammy the T-Rex vibes. There's a scene where Bully grabs another man's dick. In Tammy the T-Rex, the first 5 minutes, there's a scene where Paul Walker fights a bully by grabbing each other's dicks. Yeah, and there's a scene where that happens in this. I'm like, oh my god, if this somehow ties into Tammy and the T-Rex, I will come and I'll explode and I'll give this movie a 10 out of 10. I was so ready for that to happen, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, no, I would. That would make this even better. But man,
would have been a 10 out of 10. But woulda, shoulda, coulda. But wait, Tammy the T-Rex came out in 1994. Doesn't matter. Well, it still applies.
Is Devon with us?
Devon, are you alive? Contact us if you're alive. We cannot hear you. Say something, or I'm giving up on you. Oh, Tad is listening in. Hi, Tad. Do you have any thoughts on Taxi Driver or Christine while we're waiting for our friend Devon to come back? Please feel free to share now. Oh, he's just listening. No worries. Just listening. All right. You know what? While Devon comes back, why don't the two of us give our final thoughts on Christine?
Yes, hopefully we can cut this then post.
Nah, I'm gonna leave it in.
Okay, sure.
I'm leaving all of this in just to make Devon suffer.
Okay.
Not because I'm lazy or anything. Go on.
I will give this. You go first. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. You had just what was it, Mouth of Madness, and you rated that a 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
How did this compare? What's your rating?
Well, it's nowhere near as good as In the Mouth of Madness. Not even close. Nowhere near as good as The Thing.
Sure.
Holy crap! Doesn't even come close. I will say it is a beautifully shot and masterfully directed movie for such a piece of shit, poorly paced, poorly written, dumb story. That makes me wonder if Stephen King is a hack or not. So I will give John Carpenter credit for that. But unfortunately, he really couldn't save the rest of the movie for me. So I'm giving this one. I was gonna give it a 6. I'm gonna give it a 5.5, at least for now. Maybe that'll improve. It's not boring though. I will give it you that. It flies by pretty fast if you watch it with friends with a bunch of weed or a bunch of drugs, bunch of beer. Could be a great time. But
not that we encourage that. But
I encourage that.
I will be a little more forgiving. I will give this a 7.5 out of 10.
Not even a nice.
No, it's a 7.5. I think it's very close to an 8. I like it. I think there's more that I like the idea of this film, like more than I actually like the finished product.
Yeah,
there's definitely room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what Carpenter does with this kind of hokey idea is nothing short of masterful. But yeah, it's pretty silly, and I feel like David Cronenberg's The Dead Zone is the superior 1983 Stephen King film. So that's kind of my final thoughts on it.
There he is. He's alive.
Yeah.
Devon?
Cargo Burr.
We missed you, man. What happened?
Where did you go? We're on
Good
the
question.
air. We're live.
Yes.
We're never going to find out, in other words.
I think I got crushed in a car and I came back.
I hate rock and roll.
Oh,
yuck,
yeah.
Yuck.
What a last line for a movie, eh?
No, that line made me angry. That line dropped my 6 to a 5.5. I was like, fuck you, movie.
I gave it a 7.5. Yeah, Devon, what do you got?
What do you got? Final thoughts.
6.9.
Yeah!
Hey!
Saw it coming.
Yeah.
I thought you were done with that joke after the tribe had...
And now it's back, baby!
Yeah!
Fair enough, yay. Yeah. Well, speaking of sexual innuendos and 6.9s, would you like to introduce Titane?
Spoilers.
Boy, I thought you'd never ask. Titane is
wait.
a 2021 film from, fuck, how do you pronounce this world?
Julia
Ducournau.
Ducournau. This is the second feature film from Julia. I have not seen her first film, Raw, but I've heard many good things about it. And after seeing Titane, oh boy, I am in the mood for some of that, whatever it is. This is a body horror film in the styles of kind of David Cronenberg, but it takes it in a completely different kind of route. Where you follow this woman who, as a child, had always been fascinated with cars and machinery, and from the very first frame, you can tell something is up with her. Like something is not quite well adjusted with this child. She kind of is like humming along with like the sounds of the car that she's in, kind of interrupting her father, and they get into a car accident, and so a titanium plate is installed in her head. And from there on, she has been wanting to, I guess, meld herself with the machine. So she does what anyone would do when they have a machine fetish. They have sex with the car, which is the main thing that people tend to talk about with this movie. But there is more to it than that. I'd say there's a lot of psychological, psychosexual kind of ramifications with this thing. And at some point, he starts lactating motor oil. So that's Titane.
Well, I think that's a good description so far. can I just go ahead and jump out here? When I first watched this film, I remember I had a very strong, reaction. I was like, "Whoa, what is this? This is incredible! I've never seen anything like this." Um, this film didn't quite hold up as well on a second watch. It's still good, um, but I'm not sure that I agree with necessarily all of the hype that it gets. Um, and let me explain why. Because this film does something interesting, and it's commendable, if nothing else, for the audacity.
Yeah,
But
especially in this day and age of cinema.
for sure, for sure. But what I'm talking about specifically is when you look at a film uh, that has a genre twist, and I mean, spoilers from here on out for Titane, because Titane does something interesting where you look at something like, say, From Dusk Till Dawn, right? From Dusk Till Dawn is a very straightforward 90s independent crime film. You've seen Tarantino do it like 3 times before, almost, up until this point, until the halfway mark, and it becomes a film about vampires. Bone Tomahawk is like a 1960s, like John Wayne Western. There is so much about Bone Tomahawk that is almost lifted from John Ford's The Searchers until the very third act, where it becomes something else, and it's about these cannibals and this all of this horror and viscera. And what Titane does that I found interesting is it starts out as the horrible excess and sex and violence. And then around the second act, it goes to a more straightforward sort of drama. Mm-hmm. And I think that that is commendable in and of itself, because every other film that would attempt to do something like this, I think, would inverse that, where it suddenly becomes the body horror. It suddenly becomes the gruesome and the profane and the psychosexual whatever. And that was kind of what Cronenberg did with, like, The Fly. It's a very straightforward kind of sci-fi story, but as it goes on, it gets more and more grotesque, where this film is like almost all of the grotesque, ugly parts of it are in the first act. This has like 30 minutes of this, like, music video aesthetic, and there's sex, and there's like a whole sequence of her walking around and just murdering these people at a party. But then
man, that whole
no,
scene
and
was terrific too.
it's incredible. But then the film just peters out, and I kind of wonder. I don't know, because this film has a very specific audience. Because the thing is, like, if you're a fan of this sort of like grindhouse, early Cronenberg, like B movie kind of aesthetic, you're probably going to be bored after the first 30 minutes. But at the same time, it's like, if you're looking for this sort of art house, independent drama that's exploring these kind of complex, psychosexual themes of like, gender binary and the fluidity of that, the first 30 minutes might be a hard watch. So this film has a really, tough balancing act to make, and I think it's commendable just on that alone. But I will say that for whatever reason, the second time that I watched this yesterday, I really noticed that that shift is incredibly dramatic. And I'm not sure that it quite worked for me this time, where, I don't know, I kind of wish that there was almost more of the first like 30 minutes of the film, because it does feel more disconnected in a way.
Well, I
I mean,
disagree.
I
Actually
think there's a
thought, yeah, go
cohesion
on.
there's a cohesion to it. Like there's this clear what's the word for it? Like she's clearly not human. Even from like the first scene, I mean, even when she's like a small child, clearly there's something off with this person, and she slowly kind of transforms into this human machine kind of hybrid, and I don't know what exactly it's saying there, but um, I think all the sequences of her kind of being pregnant and then just again, lactating motor oil or revealing that there's like parts of her, you know, under her skin that are also like um, metal, and it just shows this kind of horrific inside out kind of transformation on her end. Um, I don't know. I feel like that it was saying something a lot about her character. Like this is a character that you don't really relate to, but you see kind of go through this experience, and it's really interesting. And the director herself, although she said in an interview that she likes to avoid explaining things, she did say that she herself doesn't really relate to this character. And if you're not really relating to a character, what you can relate to perhaps is like the physical aspect of what she's going through.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. It still worked for me. Like going from this progression when you see that she really is like disconnected from people from like the get-go, you realize that she isn't a human kind of character, so you really start to look at her in a different way, and everything following that. I don't know. I guess I'll have to see it again just to figure out how I felt about it, but it just felt like a constant trajectory for me. Like there wasn't exactly a clear turning point, although there was bizarre to me why the guy would pick her up by chance. Like, did she get in contact with him prior? Is he just saying that this is his son out of desperation? Like, there's a lot of unanswered questions
I
uh,
assumed it was a
going into
desperation
this.
thing.
But
Yeah.
there is a clear kind of trajectory to it, I think. Even though it's hard to know where it's going, it feels there's I don't know. It feels like the story's going to progress this direction one way or the other.
Yeah, it's interesting you feel that way, Steven, because I feel the opposite. Like, I feel like the film was almost kind of losing me in the first 30 minutes. Like, really, I love body horror, but it's
See,
this.
this was,
The film is
yeah.
gonna, all the film is gonna be just all of this like body horror aspects that are well
Well, see,
done,
and
but
this is
there's no
what I'm
build
talking
up
about.
to it or anything. But it won me over in the second half, and it actually made me appreciate the first 30 minutes more because of that. And I feel like it perfectly establishes what the film is about. And basically, the what I took away as the purpose of this movie is like accepting people for who they are, like no matter how horrible they are or how messed up they are, like mentally or physically, or what they've been through and what they've done
Sure,
to
but I
others.
mean, do
And the
you
film is just
really?
looking past all of that and find a way to accept that. And I think having the first half be so horrific and violent is a perfect way to express that, because we have to adapt to that horrific nature. We have to find a way to accept it, just like these characters do in the second half of the story.
Well,
That was
sure,
really
but it.
beautiful and touching to me.
No, I understand that, but at the same time, I mean, it's actually funny because this is what I'm talking about, where I had the reaction of like I wanted more of the first 30 minutes, and you wanted less of the first 30 minutes.
But I
I think
wouldn't
that's
want it
kind of
any other
funny.
way, is what I'm saying.
No, but I know, but it's the thing is, it's like, did you guys have the opinion that it's almost hard to sympathize with her in a way? I
But
mean, the
I feel
film
like that was the
is
point. Like, I don't think it was
well,
trying to sympathize with her situation, but not so much with her. And I feel like it's the other
well,
characters trying to connect with her that we sympathize with
I
more.
don't empathize with her, but I do like on the visceral level, you sympathize. She is something she doesn't quite understand, and she doesn't connect with other people around her, and she just kind of acts out in this impulsive way,
Yeah.
which I don't agree with, and I think is horrific. But on that sense of her not knowing how to connect to other people and not understanding what she is, there is something to sympathize with there, and maybe her trying to express herself in different ways. Like she is something that isn't human. That's what I see it as. And then her trying to find her own sense of identity and purpose in this guy, unfortunately, who's trying to see a humanity in her that doesn't really exist, and he's kind of the folly of this. Unfortunately, I thought there was a really interesting line from his wife saying, don't take advantage of his folly, something like that, which I thought was a really interesting line.
Yeah. Don't take
In the
advantage of
context of
his
this.
emotions. Yeah, it's the characters trying to connect with her that we're supposed to empathize with more. Like, I don't think we're supposed to connect with her in any way, but the film is, in a way, like Taxi Driver, it's kind of showing the world from her point of view. And how strange,
I
like, all these
empathize with
desperate
her not
characters are.
understanding what she is.
Yeah.
Well, no, and I agree with that, but Taxi Driver also, I mean, in a way,
I'm not saying it's like Taxi Driver, just saying it's like
no,
it in the
no,
sense
but I
of,
mean, Taxi Driver, I think is more, this film has this incredibly difficult task, Titane, where it's trying to almost humanize the inhumane. And I don't know that by the end of it's like, because this film almost is asking you to feel sorry for this character in a way.
I do feel sorry for his situation. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to empathize with the character's actions.
Oh no,
I
don't think that was the director's
intent
either. Like,
yeah.
She like the director herself said that she doesn't really connect with this character, but she's like trying to still show this journey that's really interesting.
For sure, and I think I don't want to give the impression that I didn't like this film, because there's still a lot that I love about this film.
Indulgence.
Yeah, no, it's just like that was something I picked up on a rewatch, and I feel like I need to see Raw. I need to see this film probably again. But I think that this is a director who has immense promise.
Yes.
I mean, this is someone who is going to be one of the next big things. I mean, this is like,
she is a promising young woman.
I'd say she is up there with the directors of Greener Grass, of female directors that have so much promise and so much potential and so much originality. And they aren't just talking about issues with female violence, issues with women's culture and everything. They're like, no, we want to express like these original, unique stories.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen Greener Grass, so I really can't.
Yeah, Jocelyn DeBar and Don Luebe, directors.
I can't comment on that, but I will say, if I had to make a list of directors that have made, say, less than 5 films, like 5 films or less, that like if they came out and said they were making a film tomorrow, like I would be in theaters the next day.
Exactly.
Like I would put her on this list, and I would put I mean, personal bias, I'd put the Safdie brothers, I'd put S. Craig Zahler on there, but what she's doing is she's using these sort of like B-movie body horror plots in this really new and exciting way, and I never once feel that what she's doing is hollow. I think she really does have an understanding and appreciation of these films, and she's trying to channel them into something new and something, maybe even if it doesn't resonate with me 100%, like I had my issues with kind of the pacing of the first act into the second and third, there's still something here that, I never got the sense that this wasn't the film she set out to make. Everything feels so purposeful. Everything feels so like it's completely her own aesthetic that she's trying to achieve. And it's, I think that in and of itself, from having the vision not only of just a film as complicated and as hard to pull off as this is, but just being able to see it from beginning to end and execute it, I mean, that's commendable in and of itself.
I mean, it's crazy that like with the main character who seems to be as cold and as heartless as she is, the film itself seems to have a lot of heart in it.
It's very
and I think that's just,
no, it does.
It's with the characters around her, so there is a lot of heart in this film, and it makes me very excited to see what she does next. This is the most transformative kind of development in the body horror genre since the Cronenbergs, basically, and I'm lumping in Brandon as well because he's kind of taking on the same mantle that David has. Although David's going to be coming back with a vengeance, apparently, with Crimes of the Future, from what we've heard of
Fingers crossed.
first reactions to that film. I'm very intrigued, and what that's going to be. But there, yeah, it's a very exciting time to get into a body that is turning on you.
Can we talk about how great of an actor the firefighter was? Like, what a performance.
Yeah.
Vincent Linden, he absolutely carries this movie. I mean, partially true because he's a firefighter, but also because he's just... he has a way of expressing himself without feeling like he's trying too hard. Like, you can tell, like, just with the look of his eyes that he's more troubled and more emotionally vulnerable, as his wife points out, than he actually is. Like, it's... Every scene with him, I was just like, I want to give you a hug, man. I feel so bad for you, man. But not in the way that felt cheesy or stupid. Like, he never crosses that line with his character, which it very easily could have, given like what they explored his character.
It's also interesting because when the film starts out, they're both kind of trying to be the most exaggerated version of themselves. You know?
Yeah.
When he's injecting himself with this hormone, you know, like testosterone and disfiguring his body and, you know, trying to be like super masculine. And by contrast, she's like, you know, like just sexual and like striptease on top of a car. And, you know, she has sex with the car.
Throw on lipstick in a mirror.
No. And it's like, it's shot like a music video porno, you know? And it's like...
Nice satire in that scene, I thought.
No, well, I mean, and it kind of works, but it's like... It's funny because, like, the moments that these characters seem the most at peace is when they're just, like, the opposite of themselves, you know? He's kind of dancing and, like, being goofy and, like, there's this whole, like, the scene where he's like in the fire station and they're all like, you know, dancing like it's almost like a bunch of girls having a sleepover.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, like, she's the most at peace when she's in this like boy, you know, like clearly
just hanging out with the boys.
You know, no. And so I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of commentary there, and I don't even like... I mean, I don't know if I understand all of it. I don't know if I agree with all of it, but it's just the way that it's presented and the way that it makes you think. I mean, there's...
It's admirable. Yeah, and it's explored in an interesting way. It's not like explicit and there's no characters talking down to you. No, it's just explored through the behavior of the characters in the filmmaking.
Yeah.
Which is how
leaves
a film
room for
should
interpretation,
be.
which I think is what's great, is that people can pull different things from this. And I remember seeing one review that Steven posted. Like, when we do these reviews, we end up pulling other people's reviews to get ideas going. And the one guy was calling the whole thing lazy, which I thought was interesting because a lot of the points that he had against it were points that I thought were in its favor.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think he did. I think he did raise some interesting points in what he was talking about. But I think that it's...
The film is anything but lazy, though. Like, I don't.
I don't think that I would call this film lazy. It's everything that it's doing is purposeful. Now, whether or not I agree with that, or whether or not it works for me specifically, is kind of irrelevant. Like, you can tell this is a director's specific vision that they're bringing to life, and I think that is the opposite of lazy.
I'd agree with that.
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
Don't have much else to add. Like, it's gorgeously shot. Like, we should talk about like the filmmaking aspects. There's lots of really impressive long takes, great use of lighting. Yeah, very great editing. It's just incredibly well made. Yeah, His soundtrack is fantastic. I think it's the same composer as Raw, if I'm not mistaken, which makes me want to see Raw even more because the soundtrack absolutely slaps. I didn't rewatch this film in time for the episode, unfortunately, because I was still recovering from a sickness. But yeah, I still remember it. It's saying a lot about the film, where despite the fact I haven't seen it in a while, there's just so much about it that's just etched into my brain, and that alone
it
is
sticks
just
with you. Yeah, no, it
deserving
does.
of praise.
And I watched it for the first time a few days ago, and it still feels pretty raw.
Hey, what would you guys
Yeah.
give it out of 10? Don't have much else to add. It's great.
I don't.
Pacing's
I
a
don't
little
have
weird
much
at
else.
times, but I really don't have any other complaints.
I'm
Oscars,
gonna
what the fuck?
give it. I'm gonna give it an 8. I think it's really solid,
Nice.
and it's very provocative, and I like that it stays with you for better or for worse afterwards. I like films that kind of linger on in your subconscious and make you reflect on reality and what other people might be experiencing. And I feel like, films have the power to do that. They have the power to take you outside of yourself and experience things kind of vicarious through vicariously through other people, and and look at reality in a different way for better or for worse. And you get to do that just for a couple hours, kind of experience things through another person, another body, and see how life can be interpreted. Because I feel like this expresses a lot of anxieties about, womanhood possibly, which are not questions that ever would have occurred to me on that level, because I don't have that kind
Sure.
of body. But I feel like,
Yeah.
well, there's probably an element to this criticism that we're missing here, with
Oh,
that.
for
But I feel
sure.
I
Yeah.
feel like for a lot of women watching this, they felt that very personal connection to it for better or for worse. A lot of people might have been, disgusted with it, and other people might have been like, "Oh, I'm being heard, and this thing that I'm feeling is being expressed on the big screen," and I think that's awesome. You know,
Well, and there
ha
is that
having an
entire
outlet to it.
sequence.
Yeah.
There is that sequence where the one character, she's on the bus and she exchanges a sort of knowing glance to another woman as these guys are in the background and they're like getting wild and talking
Oh yeah.
some locker room language, and it's like those are moments that it's like it's exploring things and it's talking about things that I A wouldn't have thought about, or B, like I don't know. I mean, it's like, do I understand it, or if I did understand it, would I agree with what it's saying? I don't know, but there is something about this that is
I
just
mean, hell, I've been perturbed by people just being rowdy in general, so I
no,
relate to
sure,
just
but I
that
mean, this
aspect
is
of it.
no, and I mean obviously, but this is like specifically talking about a lot of deep subjects, and I think it's a film that is worthy of rewatching and re-exploring, and almost kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where it's like you can get something new out of this every time. I feel like this might go down as a modern masterpiece. This film did win the Palme d'Or at the
Mhm.
Cannes Film Festival
Yay.
last year. Was shamefully not nominated at the Academy Awards.
Yeah, it should
But
have at least been
yeah,
nominated.
oh, for sure.
Like,
I'm gonna
best
give
makeup?
this an
Come on. If this was nominated for best makeup, it would have won. Easy.
no, for
Oh,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah. I'm gonna give this an 8.
Great.
It's a good solid 8, and it could go up and it could go down, but yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with that.
I'm
And
gonna go hot. Yeah, go on.
interesting fact about the Palme d'Or though. This was the only the second ever female director to win that, and the first one was Jane Campion for The Piano.
Very cool, very cool.
Nice.
I
Yeah.
still need to see that one,
You
so
Yeah.
definitely do.
I will bump that up on my watch list. Ian, what
Uh,
would you give Titane out
Titane.
of yeah, or however you say it?
I'm
Uh,
gonna give Titan a 9 out of 10. I'm gonna go higher than you
oh,
guys. Yeah, I think
Wow.
this film's absolutely fantastic. Does something interesting with the body horror genre. Very heartfelt. Tackles a lot of serious themes without the subtlety of a sledgehammer like most films that nowadays do. Sadly, yeah, it's just a wonderful expressive work of art, and I kind of wish more films, especially like indie projects were like this one. So yeah, 9 out of 10. It's fantastic. Could change on their watch, but I doubt it. It's great.
Yeah,
And would not
yeah.
recommend watching with your parents in the next room because they'll think you're watching a porn. So 9 out of 10.
Oh no.
Good stuff.
And
Yes, I've
I
heard
do
this
have to say one
story.
thing about this. There's a lot of like unity in this, and there is a lot of, sexualization, but honestly, the way it's portrayed in this doesn't even feel that sexual. It
It's
feels
very
just like
tasteful.
it shows the body as just like a matter of fact thing that she has, and eventually it becomes a horror
Well,
to deal with.
okay,
I feel like that's I think that's a really important element of here. It
well,
doesn't seem
the
yeah.
first act does border on some kind of like softcore porn. I mean,
Oh yeah,
let's be honest. I mean,
for
there's
sure.
that. There's also that really bizarre scene where she starts like chewing that other woman's nipple off. It's
Oh yeah, that was uncomfortable.
very
That's someone's
uncomfortable, and
fetish.
I'm
Because
not
it's like
sure how
she
it
was
all.
more well, the way I saw it is that she was more interested in the piercing and the metal, and like and that
Oh,
shows
Yeah,
okay,
because she's
maybe
and
that's
hormonal.
it's
it.
and no that's how I read it, because she had sex with the car prior to that,
Yeah,
so
That's her
she's
I
fetish.
more interested
think
in the hardware and those things, which is
I
I
think the
mean
car
this
from Titane and the car from Christine should hook up,
Yeah,
and
I
then
can't believe I haven't mentioned this. This film 100% reminds me of Tetsuo the Iron Man, which is
ah,
a
another
little
film I
bit.
won't shut up about until you
A
watched
little
it.
bit.
This film absolutely has a symbiotic connection with Tetsuo.
Yeah,
I
at
mean,
least in the first fragment.
that's that's a surrealist film about a guy with the metal fetish, and who also starts going through some kind of transformation. I'll just say
I
that much.
definitely felt a symbiotic relationship to another film on my top 10 ever made, David Cronenberg's Crash.
Oh
I
yeah,
feel like there's a direct thorough line between
Hmm.
what Cronenberg was doing with Crash and what Julia Ducournau manages to pull off with this film. Yeah, this was probably one of my favorite films of the last year, and
Yeah,
I'm
me too.
happy to have talked about it. And man, glad to have been a part of the podcast once again.
Thank you for coming
hmm
on, man. It's always a pleasure.
Ah, for sure.
we
Devin,
have
what fresh hell waits for us next week? Ted is
well,
playing a game at the moment, I believe. But if you aren't
okay.
Ted and you'd like to sub in, please let us know.
For sure.
I think he was playing Lego Star Wars, the new Lego Star Wars game, which apparently is very glitchy, like all AAA games now. So that's great.
Of course.
That's awesome.
But
Nothing to say. Fair enough.
so
Uh,
next week we have an Easter special kind of in the works. Um, and the films that we have slated for are three films related to Easter that you probably don't want to show your kids, but they're animated films.
Well, one of them maybe.
Well, no, one of them is one I did see as a kid, and is one that I absolutely adore. And that was The Prince of Egypt,
Yeah.
a absolute classic that I cannot wait to talk about. We're gonna have Drew Adams hopefully next week to get into the animation history of that. Followed that, we have the cult Nightmare Fuel classic, Watership Down, um,
oh, fun. Yeah.
which is a cute story about rabbits. Um,
Oh boy.
oh, and then we have Alice, the Czechoslovakian stop motion animated adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, which was also meant for kids, but probably traumatized a generation
It
of
does
kids
not
growing up
present
in
itself as such.
Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have fun. I will see you guys in 2 weeks,
And
where I will be reviewing stoner comedies for our 420 episode.
smoke
Uh,
weed every day.
420 Blaze It. And
Yes.
until next time.
Stay tuned for Conan.
No, I was waiting for you to say, is it
I'm
Thursday
sorry.
yet? That's your part.
Is it Thursday yet, or Saturday yet, or Tuesday yet? Who the fuck cares? Have a great night, guys.
Who cares anymore?
See ya.
Stay tuned for Conan. Good night,